Hello everyone, welcome to the Vineyard Chess channel. Today I'd like to cover a game of Grandmaster Bassem Amin, which he played in the round 2, of which he actually joined the World Cup in round 2. So he got to play against Grandmaster Gabuzyan, and it was really a beautiful game. That's why it was chosen. We'll get to see very interesting positional ideas and quite a masterpiece looking at how to advance and improve the position. So let's start with the game. Knight to f3 was played, and after c5, we get to see g3, and after g7, bishop to g2, bishop to g7, a symmetrical setup is played, or seemingly symmetrical, which is c4. So it feels like an English opening. And we get to a reversed Sicilian kind of setup with a Marcosi bind on the other side. And well, this is quite a sound setup, which is actually a Botvinnik system for both ends. So many a times you'll get to see actually white being the one that puts up the pawns the way black has actually structured them. But its positional trump is actually to play against the d2, d4 break, which is possible in the English and also some of the most of the actual of the lines of the English. So f4 is played, and f4 basically restricts also white from going for his normal break on the queen side. So right now that square, as you can see, it's actually under lock and key. So d3 is played, and after knight from g to e7, rook to b1, just the normal setup. Castles kingside, bishop to g5, and after f6, bishop to e3. Well, this is the start of a very critical positional maneuver. I hope you will get to see the moves where need be to improve your side too. Yeah. So bishop to e6 is played. The reason why black can't actually go immediately for their d5 push is because they lose the pawn on c. So the bishop looked awkward, but it actually does a lot in the position. So this would hang a pawn, and even when you try to maybe win the bishop, it can't really be won because firstly it can be defended by the knight, and two, it can fall with the knight. Yeah, so let's go back. Bishop to e6 is played before such a move is played, and so now the bishop is released with knight to e1. Now, putting aside the weaknesses in both camps, we get to understand actually that there are many squares to take use of. For example, in the black camp, actually, they have very many weekend light squares, which can be critical in most of the lines that we're going to see. So after b6, this affirms actually the weakness of the light squares, and we get to see Grandmaster Bassem immediately hopping into the d5 square. After takes, best not to take with the knight because you'll finally lose the pawn, and even when you don't lose it, it really doesn't look or feel good than taking with the pawn to keep the chances alive. So knight to d4 is played, and after f4, which is another good move, keeping in charge the b4 square, b4 is still played anyway. So Bassem chose to exchange the pawns. Another option would actually be chopping the knight, and regardless how they take, you can win the pawn. Yeah, the pawn is quite out of reach. It might be lost again, but a pawn grabbing variation at times is not that bad, and it's playable both sides. So the exchange of the b4 pawns happens, and after the knight falling back to c7, we see the pawn is attacked twice. Bassem plays a very cool move, knight to a3, which is in time to defend the pawn by tactics. King to h8 is played. In case some are wondering why not this, it's because a knight is actually falling due to the pin on the king. and even when not taken immediately, you can just pin it and still win it later. So that would be disaster for the black camp. So we get to see king to h8 first, and now they are planning to take the pawn. So queen to b3 is played, and after queen to e to d7, connecting the rooks, bishop to d2 is played. So the bishop no longer has work on the e3 square, and apparently you'd want to defend the pawn with another pawn from behind. So that's what we get to see after the maneuver on the queen side. So right now we're getting into the critical time of the middle game, where actually the plans are getting exhausted both sides, and it's time for either a very quick initiative for an attack. You can see it's actually hard to rally an attack against anyone's king, whether white or black, but the position is rich enough for very slow maneuvers which can grant you the 4 point. b3 is played, b2, b3 is played, and in this position black played h5. Well, h5 is basically getting space on the king side, not doing anything about the white move. So we see an exchange of the pawns, and after rook takes a4. This is actually an inaccuracy that I think Grandmaster Gabuzyan didn't really evaluate so well in his calculations. This is because much as it gains a tempo on the queen, it actually favors white when they reroute the queen, because the knight would be the one to go there anyway, obviously after defending the pawn. So the rook falls back, and that means actually that the rook was literally misplaced. So now, being a move down, we get to see e4 being played, and after king to h7, knight to c4 is played. The knight is beautifully placed on the c4 square because it always attacks the weakness. So a piece has to keep at bay to defend the d6 pawn. So if we go back to this position, conveniently taking with the queen would be better, because actually this attacks the knight twice, and there's no way to defend the knight twice. Okay, you could defend it with this, but that is so passive a move, and it wouldn't really be a good result in the end. So taking it immediately is much better, and this gives black some fighting chances, because right now they can actually win the pawn in the center, and you can also win the pawn on d6, and it's holdable for a draw and any other result. So let's go back. So after the maneuver with the knight to c4, knight to c8 is played. Sadly, most of the pieces for black cannot encroach the white camp, just because of how they are clustered. Well, we can see that actually these pieces are not the best placed, more so to hop in into the position, nor to threaten or attack anything. This square is under lock and key by the pieces. Well, we can see that actually the rook might not even go any other place, because, well, there are not many squares profitable. And the other move that could be considered would be the knight hopping around too, so that it can come here, it can control there, and an exchange happens. But it's still so slow, because that's imagining white doing nothing, which is impossible. So let's go back. So after the remaneuver, Grandmaster Bassem actually clamps the position on b6 with the bishop to f5. Well, this totally negates the fact that you'll ever play that knight there. So the rook falls back down, and after h4, which is also another good move, trying to prevent any pawn breaks on the king side, most especially along the h file. So now, after g5, the king lifts up. Obviously taking wouldn't really be favorable too, because a move like this kind of seals the game. You'll have to keep next to your knights, and regardless the knight that you keep next to, you are possibly getting or running into many pins, which are not really as important. So you can exchange the bishops and still win a pawn, which is not advisable because that hangs a bishop. So sorry about that. I think the first move would be this, and then maybe after that, or any other move that you play after this, maybe that, and then that's when you can win the pawn. So this is disaster for black. Let's go back. So after the pawn push, the bishop comes to h6 and bishop to h3. A very good move, chasing away the queen and also kind of provoking something. Well, a move that actually Bassem would want to kick in is the bishop falling onto f6, f5, and this is because the bishop will always be an attacking piece and also pressuring the black camp from the queen side. So it's closed out and the bishop falls back. So this is already a permanent weakness that you cannot do much about. Well, reason being, the pawn that is overextended shall be attacked mainly by the queen, and if possible even the rook can come in slowly until it gets to the pawn. So we see knight to s6, which actually plans to try to remaneuver the knight, but it's not a good plan, because in this position you could see that black's pieces are being suffocated in greatly positionally. So f3 is played, and after the knight falling back, this is clear that the black camp doesn't have a plan in the position. An exchange happens on g, and after the pawn exchange, rook to f1, attacking the weakness that is on f6. Mysteriously, over the board, rook to b7 was played. I don't know if it was a problem actually with the annotation, because many servers of the DGT, or for us who are watching live, actually got to see this, and we all wondered why, or if it was actually a mistake. But what was played in the game was actually queen to d1. Well, it doesn't drop advantage even after taking the rook, because there's no checkmate that black can deliver, nor any significant advantage for an attack. But the chance was missed, and queen to d1 was played. Hopefully it shall be rectified maybe when everything is clear. And after king to g7, rook to f2, king walks into the pin of the rook, which becomes even sadder. Bishop to f1, and after the knight came to e, the bishop just rerouted to e2, and it's in this position that black resigned, going to be a pawn down and also in a very terrible position. Obviously you cannot do this, because even after capturing the pawn, now the queen is pinned, the king is still under the pin. So yeah, the position is collapsing soon, and very soon. So that's how Grandmaster Bassem actually got to win. It ended 1.5 to a half, and he got to qualify for the next round. See you in the next videos. In case of any suggestions, like and subscribe, comment in the comment section below, and see you next time.